All right, so let us get back into this syllabus of the history of South India. So, as I was discussing with all of you yesterday about the Pallavas, and I explained to you about the various rulers of Pallavas and their contributions. All right. So today we have to move forward from here itself. In fact. So of course, Pallavas and Chalukyas, they were the contemporaries, along with even the Kadambas in Deccan. They were also the contemporaries. Fine. Now this Kadamba can also be asked to you as a question there in prelims, that who was the founder of the Kadamba dynasty, and what was its location, and what was its major contribution in that way. So you can see on the screen, Mayur Sharman was the founder of the Kadamba dynasty. All right, and he was a learned Brahmin, fine, and he actually happened to be the founder of this dynasty who took the education from Kachi. And it is said that he was insulted by the Pallava officials, and then finally he came into existence, and rather he founded his own empire there in Vanvasi. Vanvasi, that is there in the region of on the border of Maharashtra and Karnataka. So the Gambas of Banwasi, they formed their, of course, dynasty there. And then there's a one very famous inscription, that is Talgunda inscription. So Talgunda inscription, it talks about the Kadambas, and the Kadambas, how they contribute also in the emergence of the Kannada language. Alright, so in Karnataka and Maharashtra border, this particular dynasty came into existence, and of course, they actually have been the promoter of Kannada language also in Karnataka. So that's how the contribution of Kadambas are same. Fine. You can see on the screen, this is the location of the Pallavas, Pandyas, and also the Kadambas. You can see on the screen Kadambas location. It is in Karnataka right now. Okay, so Karnataka and Maharashtra border nearby, just above Goa. You can see the location of Kadambas was there. So that is how Kadambas from their dynasty. Some of the small information of all of you. Then we have already discussed about Pallavas yesterday itself, and I told you about the Sinha Vishnu was the real founder. However, Bappa Dev is understood to be the founder of Pallavas, but we have already discussed in fact yesterday itself. And Mahendra Varman, I talked about that he was also one of the rulers of Pallavas, and he happened to be converted from Jainism to Saivism from a scholar named Appar. This question is asked also in prelims at times. Alright, so Mahendra Varman was initially a Jaina follower, but he was converted to Saivism. Fine. And I told you about this Mahendra Varman. He composed a very famous book, Matta Vilas Paramhans. So Matta Vilas Paramhans is also asked by UPSC in prelims, that who wrote Matta Vilas Paramhans in Sanskrit. So it was Mahendra Varman first, the same Pallava ruler, who wrote it. So this book, Matyavilas Paramhans, is on Kapalikas. Kapalikas was one of the sects of sadism. So Kapalikas के बारे में ये बुक बताता है, और बुद्धिज्म के बारे में भी ये बुक बताता है. ठीक है, लिखा गया संस्कृत में, लेकिन ये कपालिकास और बुद्धिज्म के ऊपर ये बुक है. ठीक है, इसलिए मत्यविलास परमहंस का इम्पोर्टेंट है, इम्पोर्टेंस है क्योंकि कपालिकास के बारे में हमें यहाँ से इन्फॉर्मेशन मिलता है. ठीक है, कपालिकास क्या था? ये एक सेक्ट था सेविज्म का, जो कि साउथ इंडिया कर्नाटका में, और कर्नाटका और तमिलनाडु के एरिया में इसका मतलब कह सकते हैं विस्तार हुआ था. ठीक है, that was the issue. Then you also have had some other writers which were discussed also, like Bharvis wrote Keta Junia, Dandin wrote the Sakumar Charita. All right, and all of them were from the region of South India only, and they studied in the Pallava court for some time. That was the basic, we can say, contributions as far as the Pallava rulers in literature happen to be there. All right, so that is the point for all of you. I have inspection will discuss that. It is in the context of Chalukyas. We have to discuss largely. Fine, that is of Pulkesin 2. So let us first of all discuss the Chalukyas of Badami. Fine. So say Chalukyas of Badami. Now today we have to start from here itself. In fact, So Chalukyas of Badami, they were the contemporary to Pallavas of Kanchi or Kanchipuram. Fine. And these Chalukyas, they were having the two lineages or two families, in fact. Chalukyas were also there in Vatapi, that is Badami. All right, Badami is located today in the area of Karnataka. Fine. So that is Chalukyas of Badami. And on the other hand, there was also Chalukyas of Kalyani. So Chalukyas of Kalyani was also the region of the area of the Maharashtra and Karnataka. Fine. So that was Chalukyas of Kalyani was also there. So, however, out of these two Chalukyas, Chalukyas of Badami were more formidable and the more pervasive in terms of its dominance there in the South Indian politics around 6th century, 7th century in the history of India. All right. So that is how Chalukya's dynasty actually is said to have emerged from the Kadambas only. So they were also one of the feudatories of Kadambas, and from Kadambas only Chalukyas also got immersed, all right, in the area of Karnataka, in fact. Fine. That is how Chalukyas came into existence in that particular manner. And Chalukyas is said to have contributed in terms of performing some Rigvedic sacrifices or Vedic sacrifices as to made like, and that's how they were known for also promoting the Brahmanical system there in South India. So you can see Pallavas and Chalukyas were the biggest promoter of the Bhakti movement, in fact, in South India in that way. Fine. And Kirti Varman was the first ruler, the founder of the real Chalukya Badami in South India. Fine. So we'll talk about that. Let me first of all share with you the Guinness so that we can understand the genealogy and then can come to this issue once more. See here, I hope that it is visible to all of you now. Now see, I just told you the Chalukyas were of two lineages. One was at Badami, another one was at Kalyani. Fine. And here the real founder was obviously Kirtivarman or Pulkesin, whatever you can say, but the name Jaising was there, who was one of the feudatories of Kadambas, and finally he created a parallel dynasty of Chalukyas. Fine. So Jaising was the real, I mean, the founder basically. Real founder could be Pulkesin one, Kirtivarman first, both in fact. So Pulkesin one was the successor of Jaising, and then he was succeeded by Kirtivarman first. Fine. So Kirtivarman first, we come to know about him through a Mahakut pillar inscription. Mahakut pillar inscription. Fine. And there in this Mahakut pillar inscription, he has been referred as Satyashray. So Satyashray was the name given to Kirtivarman first of Chalukyas. Fine. So another achievement of this person was that he was able to occupy Goa. Goa was named as Revati Dweep. So this question can be asked you in prelims, that which island was known as Revati Dweep in ancient India? Which region was known as Revati Dweep in ancient India? It was Goa. All right. So Goa was named as Revati Dweep, and this Revati Dweep was controlled by Kirtivarman for the first time. Fine. And then he was succeeded also by Pulkesin II. The Pulkesin II is another very famous ruler of, in fact, most famous, I would say. Most famous ruler of Chalukya was Pulkesin II. Now, see, Pulkesin II, his era began around early 7th century CE. And there he was able to, in fact, control a larger empire of Chalukyas. He was a contemporary to Harshvardhan and Mahendravarman of the Vardhan dynasty in North India and the Pallavas in South India. So Pulkesin II was contemporary to Harshvardhan and also Mahendravarman of Pallavas. All right. So that was the era of Pulkesin II, and Pulkesin II is quite famous because we have a very great information about him through Ahol inscription. So Ahol inscription is a great description, provides great description about the achievements of Pulkesin II. Fine. And Ahol inscription was written by Ravi Kirti. This question is asked also in prelims, that who was the author of Ahol inscription. So author of Ahol inscription was Ravi Kirti, and he was in the court of Pulkesin II. All right, so he eulogized the achievement of Pulkesin II, that how did he defeat even Harshvardhan in north. All right, so he is said to have defeated Harshvardhan in north and also defeated Narasimhavarman. He also defeated Mahendravarman of Pallavas, in fact. All right. And then finally he was defeated also by the Pallava ruler Narasimhavarman first. That is the end of the Pulkesin II era. Fine. So first of all, he defeated Mahendravarman. He also defeated Harshvardhan. So Pulkesin II achievement is mentioned there in the Ahol inscription. However, in his rule only, the another dynasty of Chalukyas was formed in Vengi. Chalukya also got a third lineage, a third family, that is Chalukya of Vengi. So Chalukya Badami was already there, Kalyani was already there. Then Chalukya of Vengi also came into existence in his rule only. And it was formed by Vishnu Vardhan, his brother, Chalukya of Vengi. Fine. However, his era came to an end with the defeat of he was defeated by Narasimhavarman first of Pallava dynasty. This is how his era came to an end. But during his era, certain very remarkable achievement was that in Ajanta painting, he has been depicted as receiving and sending an embassy to the Persian court. Fine. So this question is asked frequently in UPSC by UPSC in the prelims examination, that who has been depicted in the Ajanta painting to receive the Persian ambassador in his court. So he sent the embassy to the Persian court. He also is said to have received the ambassador of Persia in his court. And that is how it is depicted there in the Ajanta painting. So Ajanta painting is another very great source to tell us about the achievement of Pulkesin II. So Pulkesin II era we come to know largely from Ahol inscription and Ajanta paintings. Fine. And then of course was succeeded by Vikramaditya first. Alright. So Vikramaditya first, he succeeded. Then Vijayaditya was the longest reign of Chalukya ruler was of Vijayaditya. Alright, he ruled here from 696 to 733 CE. Fine. On the other hand, we have Chalukyas of Kalyani also, who was having control over Karnataka and the region of Odisha, in fact. Fine. Someswar first of the Chalukya of Kalyani was the major ruler. Fine. They also have their capital in Manyakhet. So Chalukyas of Kalyani also shifted, or rather, they also created their own capital in Manyakhet. Fine. Someswar I, he was from the Chalukya of Kalyani, who also carved out another capital in Manyakhet. Kayal II is understood to be real founder of Chalukyas of Kalyani in terms of providing the administrative setup of this particular entire dynasty. But the remarkable achievement was achieved by Vikramaditya VI. Now, Vikramaditya VI of Chalukyas of Kalyani, this ruler is remarkably important for all of you because his time period is 1076 CE to 1126 CE. That is his time period of Chalukyas of Kalyani, ruler Vikramaditya VI. And why is he so important? Because in his court, there were two remarkable authors, two very prominent authors. One was Bilhan, another one was Vijayaneshwar. So this question can be asked to you that Bilhan and Vijayaneshwar was in the court of which ruler? So he was Vikramaditya VI. Now, Bilhan has written about Vikramanaka Dev Charitra. Vikramanaka Dev Charit was the text of the book written by Bilhan. Fine. And the remarkable, I would say, achievement of his era was the writing of a law book named Mitakshara. This question can be asked to you in prelims. Mitakshara is a law book written by Vijayaneshwar during his era. So, Mitakshara is a legal text, law book. It talks about the transfer of property rights. Fine, it discusses about the civil rights, the civil laws, the family law. In fact, it talks about the transfer of property rights. All right, so to the sons and grandsons before even the death of the father. Fine. So pater familias basically before the death of the father. In fact, still the property rights can be transferred to the sons and grandsons. So this is described in the Vijnaneshwara's books Mitakshara. On the other hand, there's another book of Chimut Vahan, Daya Bhag. See here, Daya Bhag is another law book written by Jimut Vahan during Harsa times. The way I'm sharing this information with all of you doesn't mean that these two books are the major law books which guide India's family and civil laws. All right, so Indian family and civil laws are a direct replica of Daya Bhag and Mitakshara's. Fine. So Mitakshara and Daya Bhag are the two source of Indian civil and family laws. So Daya Bhag was written by Jimut Vahan. So this question can be asked to you. So Vijnaneshwar wrote Mitakshara, and here who wrote Daya Bhag? So it was written by Jimut Vahan, was the author of this particular book. He was contemporary to Harshvardhan. Fine, and he wrote about the family law which is applicable, which is still followed today in eastern part of India. That is, the right over property can only be obtained by the son after the death of the father. Fine. And in Bengal and Assam, this Daya Bhag acts as a major guiding guiding principle to define and decide the dispute over property. Fine. So Daya Bhag is applicable in Eastern India and Mitakshara in rest of India, in fact. Fine. So even today, this law is applicable in a similar way. Fine. So Daya Bhag was also a commentary upon the Yagnavalakia's law book. Fine.
Sir,
Uh-huh.
so recently some act was passed that women can also inherit father's property.
Right.
So, is this still? I mean,
No,
for
that was not recognized by Daya Bhag and Mitakshara. In Daya Bhag, what was recognized that sons have the first right over the property of their ancestors. Once sons are not there, then the daughters can claim the right. All right. So this now has been changed with this particular amendment in the Family Law or the Property Right Act in India now. Fine. So this was a practice, and that's how this practice was going on since early medieval time itself. All right. That is the point. Fine. So these two books are important for all of you. That is Dayabhag and Mitakshara. So you have to remember about it because for sure these are going to be very important area for where the questions are going to be framed for you in prelims. Fine. Then contribution of Chalukyas. You can see that they contributed in Western style of architecture, which we have already discussed about it. I told you about that Chalukyas were able to contribute in development of three major cities like Matapi, Ahol, and Pattadakal. Now, these three are very close cities located adjacent to each other. All the three are located adjacent to each other in the region of Karnataka today. Vatapi, Ahol, and Pattadakal. Ahol is also called as City of Temples. All right, a whole city is also called a city of temples, and Chalukyas were able to promote Buddhism, Jainism, and Brahmanism all together in India. Fine. Besides that, they were also able to promote paintings. Ajanta painting is one of the examples of Pulkesin too. Temples were also constructed by them in the Western style, and the Lad Khan Temple, Durga Temple, Meguti Temple of China, Melgatti Sivalaya in Badami, Papanath Temple, Virupaksh Temple, all right, Sangameswara Temple. So these are temples which were constructed by the Chalukyas. Fine, that was their major contribution in the temple architecture for all of us. So now I'm sharing with you the PPT. All right. Now, see, this is exactly we were talking about regarding the purchasing of Chalukyas. We have discussed also about briefly Pandyas of Madurai. Fine. So now you can see on the screen, this is the longest dynasty that remained in existence right from the ancient time to the medieval time. All right. However, in the case of Cholas, Pallavas, and Chalukyas, they all almost had come to an end by the beginning of the medieval time itself. The Pandyas continued till the 14th century in India. All right. So Pandyas happen to be one of the longest dynasties of South India. In fact, longest, not only one of the, in fact, longest one. If a question is asked to you in prelims like this way, which among the following dynasty was the longest dynasty in South India? So the answer is going to be Pandyas because their existence was there in the time of right from Sangam age till the time of Alauddin Khilji. All right. So in that way, Pandyas were the longest ruling dynasty there in South India in that way. However, in between intermittent, there were some gaps in the continuity, but overall, they remained in the picture of South Indian history since Sangam era till the era of course, Alauddin Khilji of Delhi Sultanate. Fine, that is the point. So, Pandya's role, I just told you, I mean, we have discussed about this in the context of uh, the Sangam era, in fact. But one information for all of you that can also be asked as a question is which was the famous port of the Pandyas, which has also been discussed by Marco Polo? All right. So this question can be asked you in prelims. That's the reason why you can say the last point is important for all of you. The rest of the points are not so important. The last point is equally very important for all of you. That is Kayal Port. So Kayal Port was the most famous port of the medieval period of medieval Pandyas. Fine, and this port has also been explained by Marco Polo. So this question can be asked to you that which port of Pandyas has been explained or rather talked about extensively by Marco Polo. So Kayal Port, you remember about it. Their economic contributions was in the context of the trade relationship that was already there, all right from ancient times. Fine, but even in the medieval time, it continued, especially in the context of horse trade. So the biggest port town under the Pandyas was Kayal Patinam, same Kayal I just talked about. And there were gold coins that were in circulation. Fine. And the gold coin was named various names were there. This is Kasu, Palan Kasu, Arandan Palan Kasu, Kanan, Kalanchu, Pon. They were all gold coins. Fine. So Kasu, Palan Kasu, Pon were the gold coins during the Pandya kingdom. The Pandya kingdom basically. And horse trade was the most active, you can say, economic activity in the Pandyas. You can see here one of the historians, Vasaf. He writes that as many as 10,000 horses were imported into Kayal and other ports of India, of which 1,400 were to be of Jamaluddin's own breed. The average cost of each horse was 220 dinars of red gold. So that is how you can see horse trade was most active, you can say, trading activity at that particular point of time of the Pandyas in the early medieval time. Fine.
Sir, what is red gold?
Red gold say, I mean, this is called as pawn. Red
Oh,
gold,
sorry, sir.
pawn. Red gold was the purest form of gold, in fact.
Okay.
All right, they were called as red gold. Fine. So I just talked about the same thing, in fact, about the Pandyas. This is, in fact, in that way. The rest of the achievements of Pandya were in the context of course, construction of temples, medieval era temples were constructed by them. Fine. And sculptures of Shiva, Vishnu, Ganesh, Subramanya, Surya, Brahma, they all were done by the Pandyas. But the most important and remarkable achievement was the Meenakshi temple. So Meenakshi temple was patronized by Pandyas only in South India. All right. So that is how their contribution is important. The content Meenakshi temple of South India. Fine. Then rock cut temples and paintings were also developed by them. In fact, for example, you can see rock cut temples were there in these all regions like Patti, Thirumayam. These names are not so important. That's why you should not remember this name. Some of the names like Sitna Vasal is important because Sitna Vasal is an important site in South India. So Sitna Vasal, why? Because here you have the huge amount of paintings. And Sitna Vasal is also known for the Jana cave temple, in fact, in South India. In fact, that for that particular purpose, for Sitna Vasal is important for us. Fine. So that is how we know about the contribution of Pandyas, especially in the context of paintings in the temples and also rock cut temples were constructed by them in South India. Fine. As for religion rituals are concerned, we have Veldi Kuddi copper plate, which gives us information about the achievement of the Pandyas, especially in conducting Ashumev, Vijayanagara, Vajpayee, Yaj. These all are the Vedic practices basically. So you can now understand by this time Vedic culture had already percolated in South India, deep South India, in fact, in that particular manner. Right? And Pandyas were initially also Jainas, but later they adopted Saivism. Right? And that's how Pandyas were also having got the Saivites, but also some of them are Vaishnavites. So this is how the Bhakti movement also got a boost because of their practices. Their era came to an end with the Malik Kafur. I just told you about Alauddin Khilji. So till there, they were very dominant. In fact, in that point of time. But however, after the defeat of or capturing of area by Malik Kafur, what we see that the Pandyas started losing their significance, especially in South Indian politics, especially in Tamil Nadu, deep Tamil Nadu area politics. They were shifted to Tirunelveli, a small area, and there only they remained for some more period of time. In fact, fine. And by the time when Vijayanagara Empire got immersed in South India, of course, in this context only, that Vijayanagara Empire actually captured this whole area under Pandyan Kingdom under their own control only. So by 16th century, Pandyan Kingdom got lost, got extinct altogether, got merged altogether in the Vijayanagara Empire itself. Fine. That is how end of Pandyas are seen. Fine. So Rajputas were also there, in fact, in central India. All right. And they also came as a successor of Chalukyas. So when Chalukya of Badami declined, they gave shape to the emergence of Rajputas in Deccan of Indian territory, basically. So Rajputas succeeded Chalukyas of Badami, all right, and they also built up a vast empire in Deccan area. And this Rajputa dynasty is known primarily for the achievements of some of the great rulers of Rajputas like Tati Durg. And Tati Durg was the first known ruler of Rajputa dynasty, and he is said to have defeated Chalukyas and conquered even the Badapi, I mean, Badami or Vatapi, what you can say. Fine. So Dante Durg or Dante Varman was the same, in fact, and he is said to have defeated Kirti Varman, two of Chalukyas, and that is how he established his own rule of Rajputas in the area of Deccan. Fine. That is how Rajputas came to into existence also. Dati Varman's uncle was Krishna. Fine. And Krishna one is also famous for primarily for his contribution there in Kailash temple of Ellora. Fine. So Kailash temple of Ellora was constructed by Krishna first of Rajputa. This question is also asked in prelims. Fine. And important point is that this Kailash temple has also been recognized by UNESCO as World Heritage Site now. Therefore, this question can be asked to you that who constructed Kailash temple of Ellora? So he was Krishna first of Rajputas, and he was the successor of Dati Varman, and he was uncle of Dati Varman also, in fact. And that is how Krishna's first contribution is remarkable for all of us in the context of Kailash temple of Ellora. So genealogy we don't need here because political genealogy is not going to be asked there in the prelims examination. You can see this map of Rajputas, so you can have a fair idea about it. Now you can see on the screen itself, which I told you that you have in the eastern part Palas, all right. Then you also have in the western part Gujarat Pratiharas, and then you have in Deccan Rajputas. So these three dynasties were fighting against each other to control the area of Kannauj. The same Kannauj area, which was earlier being ruled by, of course, Harshvardhan. After his demise, some smaller rulers also came into existence in Kannauj, right? And like Yashovarman was there. So Kannauj was the most fertile area, and all of these three kingdoms wanted to control over Kannauj. So that's how, after in the post-Gupta, post-Harshvardhan period, the tripartite struggle between Palas versus Pratiharas versus Rajputas, that became the feature of Indian history, especially when we enter into the medieval Indian history. In fact, all right, that is how the between ancient and medieval, these three tripartite struggle was a specific feature of Indian history for all of us. The Rajputas also succeeded, or rather, also came into existence after the decline of the Chalukyas of Badami. Fine. So then
सर
by yes,
सर ईस्टर्न चालुक्य कौन से वाले हैं?
Eastern Chalukyas were there in the area of Kalyani. All right. So Eastern Chalukya were there in the area of Kalyani, and then you have also Southern Chalukyas, which also from Eastern Chalukya only there's another sub you can say group territory that is the area of Vengi. So Chalukyas were having three lineages. One was in Vatapi, another one was in Kalyani, and third one was in Vengi, Vengi.
बेंगी कहाँ पे सर?
Vengi there in the region of you can see here in the screen in Eastern Chalukya, that is a region in the northern part of Tamil Nadu. All right, so northern part of Tamil Nadu, there was Vengi area, so there they were ruling. Then Rajputas also finally came to an end. All right, and they were finally removed by Parmar dynasty. Fine, so Parmar dynasty replaced the Rajputas, and this is how the capital of Rajputas, Manyakhet or Malkhet, finally was plundered, destroyed by the Parmara dynasty, and then it was overtaken by Parmara dynasty altogether. Fine. That is how Rajputas also came to and finally end. So this was the tripartite struggle I was talking about: Rajputas versus Palas versus Gujarat Patiaras. Now see the last segment for us is Imperial Cholas. Alright, this is the last segment of our South Indian history. So emergence of Imperial Cholas, see here on your screen itself. This is the last major issue for all of us to discuss. Now you can see on the screen, Cholas were basically the two phases of Cholas were there. One was of Sangam era Chola, and another was the early medieval era Chola. Now, this early medieval era Cholas, they were called as Imperial Cholas. Now, why Imperial Cholas? Because their kingdom was not limited to only the regions of Tamil Nadu of today. Rather, they had an expanded area that is beyond Tamil Nadu. They had control in part of Karnataka, in part of Odisha, and also in part of Kerala, today's Kerala in that way. Not only that, rather they were having even the offshore empire, and therefore they are rightly called as Imperial Cholas because they were having control in Pegu that is today's Myanmar. All right, they were having their own kingdom also in Malaysia, in Indonesia of today. So in that way, in Southeast Asia, they were having control. In Myanmar, they were having control. They were having the offshore, you can say, empire. And in South India, even Tamil Nadu was under the control of Cholas only. So therefore, they have been rightly called as Imperial Cholas. Fine. Their success was primarily because they were having a very huge naval power. So none of any Indian dynasty or Indian kingdom or Indian empire in the history of India had developed such a huge, such a vast, such a strong naval power. In the entire history of India, if you can see that why India was a weak empire, or the word was why India was a weak country, it was precisely India or Indian kingdoms or Indian emperors didn't emphasize upon the importance of the naval power, except the Cholas. That is the story of entire Indian history. Now you will not find any other empire in the entire history of ancient medieval time like Cholas developing such a robust naval power, not even by the Mughals. And that is precisely the reason why the Mughals also got defeated by the Britishers, in fact, because Britishers had developed a strong naval power. Fine. So it was Cholas only who can be seen as an alternative, rather as a very progressive kingdom at that particular era, which emphasized upon the naval strength. Because of that only, they were able to have ruling over a vast empire that is beyond India also. Fine. That was the issue. And since then only, you can see the connection between the two areas, the Tamil Nadu and Malaysia or Indonesia of Singapore today. Tamilians are in great majority in Singapore. If you see Singapore demography, 7 to 8% of the population of Singapore is of Tamilians. Fine. So it is not because of last 1 or 2 decades, last 1 or 2 centuries it has developed. It got developed since 10th century CE itself. All right. So that is the reason why Tamilians have a great, you can say, control or dominance in Southeast Asian countries, especially in these three areas: Malaysia, Indonesia, and also in Singapore. It is all due to Cholas. उसी समय से Tamilians वहां रहते थे. ठीक है? That is the point. So you
सर
can see, हाँ.
सर ये फादर ऑफ इंडियन नेवी छत्रपति शिवाजी को कहा जाता है ना, बोलना तो इनको चाहिए था क्योंकि महाराष्ट्र का कोई नेवल पोर्ट मतलब एज इन था नहीं वॉरफेयर.
The father of Indian Navy.
जी सर, मैं पढ़ा था कि मराठा एम्पायर में या तो शिवाजी थे या फिर उनके कमांडर थे।
The idea was that there was some you can say steps taken by Marathas to improve or rather to improvise upon the naval strength. Like they developed their naval, navy also, and along with that, some ports also were developed by them, like Chaul, Dhol. All right, apart from the Bombay, these all ports were developed by them. But there were no, they were not at all at any, you can say, match with the naval strength of the British or the any other European powers of that particular point of time. Fine. So of course, Ghurabs were developed by them. Ghurabs were basically the ships having gunboats. All right. So gunboats were called as Ghurabs, developed by Maratha rulers only. Shivaji was in fact the original creator of this concept of Ghurabs. All right. Ghurabs को gunboat कहते थे. ठीक है, तो गनबोट वगैरह डेवलप किया था उन्होंने, लेकिन वो किसी भी हाल में ना कि पोर्टुगीज और ना ही इंग्लिश नेवल फोर्सेस के क्लोज में भी थे, ठीक है ना। तो वो कहने का मतलब है कि इंडियन कॉन्टेक्स्ट में जहाँ कुछ भी नहीं था वहाँ दे डिड समथिंग इन द कॉन्टेक्स्ट ऑफ improving the naval strength. However, Cholas were the real contributor in the strengthening of naval strength, and that is how we can prove it from the fact that they were having the offshore empire. Shivaji didn't have offshore empire. All right. So this is a very important fact for all of you.
सर वो नागपुर का जो हिस्टोरियन होता है ना, वो शिवाजी को सब कुछ बता के रखा रहता है।
So actually this is also one of the factor. Historians also interpret the history of their area in such a you can say magnanimous manner that it appears to all of us that he was the greatest of the rulers ever there in the entire history of India. That is one thing. It's of course Shivaji was one of the greatest rulers, but he was not the greatest among everyone, in fact. So obviously he was one of the formidable challenges to the Mughal authority. However, he could not also bring the concept of also called national leadership in India. He was a regional or local leader only. Right? He was not at all a national leader at that point of time. Fine. तो ये point है. खैर शिवाजी का स्टोरी अलग से डिस्कस करेंगे कभी. Cholas पे बात करते हैं. So now you can see Cholas actually came into the background of the decline of the Pallavas. In fact, the founder of Chola was also a feudatory of the Pallavas. And when Pallavas started declining, this founder, in fact, the founder of Chola was Vijay Alai. All right. And he was a feudatory of Pallavas. Somewhere around in the 9th century, in the mid of 9th century, this person, Vijay Alai, being a feudatory of Pallava, feudatory means a feudal lord, in fact, who was acting under the control of Pallavas, collecting the revenue for the Pallavas, and also maintaining the small army to serve the Pallavas. That is the meaning of feudatory, basically. Fine. So when Vijay Alai found that the Pallavas are declining, so in the mid of the 9th century, that is around 850 CE, Vijay Alai, he led the foundation of the Chola dynasty. Fine. And then afterwards, Aditya I, he came into power in 871 CE. And Aditya I, he is said to have established the political, you can say, control over the area of Tondai Mandalam. Tondai Mandalam. टोंडाई मंडलम एरिया था साउथ तमिलनाडु में ही, उस पे इसने अपना कंट्रोल कब्जा किया, ठीक है। और ये टोंडाई मंडलम जो एरिया था वो पल्लवा के अंदर में आता था सारा एरिया। तो इस एरिया के ऊपर जब कब्जा इसने किया आदित्य फर्स्ट ने, तो ये क्लियर हो गया कि अब जो है चोलास आर गोइंग टू नाउ रूल ओवर दिस एरिया वेरी सून। अब टाइम का ही फैक्टर था कि जो लास्ट रूलर था पल्लवा का, कौन था आपको पता है, याद है वो लास्ट रूलर ऑफ पल्लवास? अपराजित, कल बताया था मैंने आपको, ठीक है। अब ये अपराजित जो था, इसको हराना था या मारना था या खत्म करना था। इसको मारने के बाद the things were in the control of the, of course, with the Cholas, in fact. So Aparajit was killed by Parantak first. Fine. And once he killed Aparajit, the era of Pallavas came to an end, and it is understood that the era of Cholas will now remain, or will be remaining as a formidable power in the entire Tamil Nadu area. So Parantak first, he called himself as Sangram Raghavam. संग्राम राघवन का टाइटल इसने लिया पांटक फर्स्ट में। संग्राम राघवम मतलब रामा इन बैटल। संग्राम राघवम का टाइटल किसने लिया, पूछ सकते हैं आपको प्रीलिम्स में। Who took the title of, or rather who called himself as Sangram Raghavam in the Chola dynasty? So Rama in battle इसका मतलब होता है, so Parantak first took this particular title, and he also not only killed Aparajita, but rather he also controlled Madurai Konda. Madurai, which was the another very important reason for the Pallavas from the trade, from the where the trades and commerce used to take place. He invaded Madurai Konda. All right, Madurai was under the control of even the Pandyas, if you remember that. Fine. So Madurai is in the southern part of Tamil Nadu. There Madurai. Fine. So that area was controlled and overtaken by Parantak first only. So he was able to expand the area of the Cholas from north to south Tamil Nadu. Fine. That was the major contribution of Parantak first for all of us. So by the time of Parantak first, in the early 10th century CE itself, Cholas had established their empire altogether. However, the real, you can say, imperial ruler of Chola was Raja first and Rajendra first. Because it was Raja first and Rajendra first. They were the real imperial ruler of Cholas in terms of expanding the empire of the Cholas. Now see, Raja first here. Raja first, he came into power in around 985 CE. He was, of course, successor of Parantak first and all those rulers in between. So Raja first, after coming into power, he provided a formative period of Chola imperialism. Fine. Chola imperialism started from the era of Raja first. इससे पहले वो kingdom था. इससे पहले Chola was a kingdom. But after he coming into power, Chola started becoming an empire, Chola empire basically. Fine, that's the point. So now you can see here, Raja first is considered as the most powerful Chola king, and he took a title also of Armoli Varman. This question is asked also in prelims. Aromoli Varman title was adopted by which Chola ruler? Aromoli Varman title was adopted by Raja first. Fine. And the next important contribution of Raja first was that he was able to annex the area of Sri Lanka. He controlled area of Ceylon or Sri Lanka of today. And at that point of time, Mahindra V was ruler of Ceylon. Mahindra V was defeated by Raja first, and he controlled today's Colombo Ceylon in his command, in his control. That was the first expansion of Chola towards Sri Lanka. Second, entire northern part of Sri Lanka was called as Anuradhapur. Entire northern part of Sri Lanka was named as Anuradhapur or Anuradhapura. Anuradhapura was completely destroyed and annexed by Raja first only. All right. That was the second of his expansion. पहले वो कोलंबो पे कैप्चर किया, सिलोन को कैप्चर किया, उसके बाद पूरा पूरा नॉर्थ पार्ट ऑफ श्रीलंका उसके अंदर में आ गया, कमांड में उसमें आ गया राजा फर्स्ट के. Third point of Raja first was that he also sent his own son. His son name was Rajendra first. His own son to capture the area of entire Mysore, Karnataka, and the area of entire western Chalukyas. So many of the southern part of Chalukyan kingdom was controlled by Raja first only. So that was his second expansion of the Chola Empire. Third or fourth, whatever, he conquered the area of Maldives and Lakshadweep. Maldives and Lakshadweep. तो मालदीव तक चोला का एक्सटेंशन हो चुका था. So Maldives was also under the control of the Cholas. Lakshadweep was also under the control of Cholas. ठीक. Fifth or sixth achievement of his was he got the construction started of a magnificent Shiva temple of Rajasura Temple in Tanjore in 1010 CE. 1010 CE में Rajasura Temple of Tanjore was started. The construction started under his regime only. Fine. Then seventh achievement, sixth point. He conquered also the area of Sri Vijay in Malaysia. Sri Vijay area was conquered by him in Malaysia, today's Malaysia. Salend ruler was there in Sri Vijay. He was defeated by him. All right. And then once he defeated him, Salendra allowed Raja first, rather accepted the suzerainty of Raja first. In other words, Salendra first remained as a king, but he started paying the annual taxes to Raja first from there. Fine. So in that way, he became a feudatory of Chola ruler, in fact, in that way. Most importantly, Salendra wanted to construct a Buddhist vihar in Nagapatnam. Nagapatnam Buddhist vihar was constructed by Salendra ruler of Sri Vijay, which was allowed by Rajendra first only. That is his son. Raja first son allowed him to construct the Buddhist vihar in Nagapatnam. Fine. So that is how you can see the control was extended till area of Malaysia of today. Now he was succeeded by Rajendra first. He was his son, and Rajendra first was equally a very great Chola ruler, because whatever his fathers achieved, he expanded over those achievements. Rajendra first was a brilliant of the rulers of Cholas, in fact, and he was able to control a larger empire. In fact, he conquered Pegu. Pegu means today's southern part of Myanmar. So southern part of Myanmar was known as Pegu. तो आज जो म्यांमार है, सदर्न पार्ट का म्यांमार है, वो उसको पेगू कहते थे उस समय। तो पेगू को किसने जीता? राजेंद्र फर्स्ट ने। याद रखिएगा, ये क्वेश्चन पूछा जाता है ये सर, इससे मैं पॉइंट में बता रहा हूँ आपको सारा बात। राजेंद्र फर्स्ट, his era began from 1014 CE, 1014 CE में स्टार्ट हुआ इसका एम्पररशिप। और उसके बाद इसने कुछ ऐसे काम किए जिसमें चोला डायनेस्टी को इसने अपने पीक पे पहुंचा दिया। ठीक है, क्या था वो काम? पहला कि इसने अपने फादर के अचीवमेंट को और एक्सपेंड किया। कैसे? जो ऑलरेडी श्रीलंका का कह सकते हैं कि इन्वेजन था, उसके इसने कॉन्सेंट्रेट किया। और महिंद्रा 5 जो भाग गया था सिलोन से, छुपा हुआ था, उसको इसने कैप्चर पकड़ भी लिया। ठीक है, तो महिंद्रा 5 ने फाइनली इसको एक्सेप्ट किया कि आप ही राजा हैं श्रीलंका के पूरा। ठीक है, दैट इज हाउ he became almost a king of entire Sri Lanka at that point of time. Fine, that was his first achievement in that way. Second one was that he conquered Pegu, that is the southern part of Myanmar. Fine, so that was also conquered by him. Third one was Andaman Nicobar Islands. Andaman Nicobar Islands were also conquered by him. तो अब आप देखिएगा कि जो चोला एम्पायर है उसका मैरीटाइम एक्सपेंशन कितना बड़ा हो गया। मतलब अब अंडमान निकोबार, लक्षद्वीप, श्रीलंका, मालदीव, ऑलराइट, म्यांमार, इधर आपका पूरा का पूरा साउथ ईस्ट एशिया, ये सब इसके कंट्रोल में था। फाइन, यू कैन सी दिस पर्टिकुलर मैप ओनली, now this map will give you a perfect idea about it. राजेंद्र चोला जो थे, how he was able to expand his entire area. You can see entire eastern parts of India, right from Tamil Nadu to Odisha, including with the some part of Bengal, till the area of entire Myanmar, Bangladesh, Myanmar, and this entire, you can see, area of Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore. Now this all was under the control of only one center, that is of Chola. So India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, Maldives, all were under the Cholas. इससे बड़ा empire तो कोई था ही नहीं, in fact, in that way. When we do talk about, let's say with great pride about Ashoka or great pride about, let's say, Samudragupta in that way, but theoretically, he was the greatest of rulers ever produced by India in the entire history of India. Because his empire was expanded to the area of not only India but also to Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, Maldives of today. Fine. So entire coastal area of this particular subcontinent was under the control and command of only one ruler. He was Rajendra Chola. Fine. That was the achievement of the Cholas in that particular manner. Fine. And I just told you that he emphasized on his naval strength largely, and the naval expedition was very successful of Rajendra I. He was able to defeat various rulers of Malaysia, Sumatra, Java, alright, Sri Vijay. They all actually acknowledged the rule of Cholas only, and finally they all came under the control of Cholas. Fine, that was the success of this particular empire. Now, secondly, he was also able to send the embassies to China. So he was a real imperial ruler because he was able to also estimate the importance of China for his empire. So he sent his embassies to China in 2 years. In first time in 1016 AD CE, 1016 CE, and secondly in 1033 CE. All right. So that is how.
Can you just repeat, please?
हाँ, 1016 पहली बार भेजा, दूसरी बार भेजा 1033 CE में.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so that was the success of the Cholas in that particular manner. Fine. Then Cholas afterwards continued to rule over next almost more than 100 years, in fact, and their rule continued till almost 12th century CE, in fact. All right. Last ruler of Chola was Rajendra III. So Rajendra III was last ruler who came into power around 1182 CE, and then the Chola ruler got completely disintegrated, and there after the disintegration, the area was controlled by Yadavas, Pandyas, Hoysalas, and even Kakatiyas. So after the disintegration of Cholas, the area was controlled by the smaller kingdoms like Yadavas, Pandyas, Hoysalas, and Kakatiyas. But during their time, they were able to contribute in various aspects of socio-cultural domain, like in the aspect of promotion of religion, especially Brahminism there in South India. Fine. Their major center of activities were Gangai Konda Cholapuram and Darasuram, where a lot of temples were constructed by them. And you can see this is the biggest of the contributions, especially in the context of the bronze, the sculptures. All right, so the famous Nataraja idol was, I mean, of course, it was achieved its zenith during the time of Cholas. However, it was started by Pallavas, but it achieved its zenith during the time of Cholas only. And this is the temple that is having the highest, you can say, Viman, that is Raja Rajasura Temple. All right. So that was their achievements basically, and then finally they declined gradually. But what was the factor behind decline of the Cholas? That is equally very important for all of us to understand. See, in the rise of Cholas, also the factor were that Cholas were able to promote various other smaller powers to remain under the control of the one dominant king only, that is the Chola king. Chola was actually called as a segmentary state by many of the scholars, like Burton Stein. Let me write it down. See, first of all, why Cholas and how Cholas rose into power. Just understand that. Society of South India was divided upon professional lines. All right, we were having the Brahmins over there, and largely we were having the Valangais and Itangais. All right, Valangais and Itangais. Valangais were mainly the farmers. Itangais were mainly the artisans. Fine. So this society was not divided like in North India on the line of you can say the Varna order. But it is divided the professional order basically. Fine. So Cholas were basically the Valangais. All right. Cholas were basically Valangais. They belong to the farming community basically All right, and they acquired then the traits of the so-called warriors, and then they finally controlled the area of South India, especially the area of Tamil Nadu. That was a success behind the Cholas. But there was always a rivalry between Valangai and Idangai to supersede each other in the entire politics of South India, right from the era of Pallavas itself. ठीक है, तो पल्लवा के समय से ही ये रहा था कंट्रोवर्सी दोनों के बीच में हमेशा. ठीक. Now, finally, I just told you, Cholas were also one of the powerful Valangai. All right, they were called as Natarars. The Natarars were basically the landlords. So they acquired the power from the Pallavas, and they ruled over this area. Fine. So finally, some of the powerful peasants or farmers who were having the land control also, they came into power, or they came into power once Pallavas became weak. That is how they acquired the power. Natarars were basically one of the subsects of Valangai. They were the landlords among the farmers. And Cholas were belonging to this particular class only. Fine. So they acquired the power like this way. All right. Now you see, therefore, a person named Burtonstein has talked about a concept of segmentary state. And according to him, Cholas was segmentary state. So what do you mean by Cholas was segmentary state? See, in segmentary state, idea is the Cholas were, let's say, controlling in from the capital. Fine. Suppose the capital of Cholas were Madurai or Gangai Konda Cholapuram, because that was the capital declared by Raja first. So Gangai Konda Cholapuram. Fine. So they were controlling from Gangai Konda Cholapuram, and under their control there were various feudatories. Fine. So with the various feudatories, they were under the control of this particular king. Fine. These feudatories were also belonging to the same class, Valangais. All right. So they were the head of the Valangais sitting here, and they were simply controlling over these all people over there. They used to supply the army, the forces at time of war, and also they used to provide them the taxes, basically. Fine. So this is how they were controlling the entire affair of Chola. That's how segmented state has been discussed by Burtonstein. They themselves were also as a center of power, acting as center of power. They themselves were also acting as center of power. In other words, the judicial power, the other taxation power were enjoyed by them also parallelly. But they all used to recognize the sovereignty of Chola ruler. That is how Chola was controlling the vast empire, in fact. Fine. So what it says that when this particular king, because this system could have been only functional till the time the king is very powerful. When the king became weak, they became powerful, or they started becoming powerful. When they became powerful, they did not recognize the sovereignty of king. So they started challenging the sovereignty of king, and how this is how Chola started declining, in fact. Fine. Ur, Sabha, and Nagaram were the assemblies which was the strength of the Cholas, basically. In Uttaramerur inscription, Uttara Merur inscription, it is inscription of Parantak first. All right. Uttara Merur, this question can be asked to you. That's why it is important for all of you. In Uttara Merur inscription of Parantak first, there is a description about, there's a first description about the existence of the assemblies, local level assemblies in the Cholas. Local level assemblies in the Cholas, and those assemblies have been described in the concept of Nadu. Nadu. Fine. So what was Nadus? Nadus were basically different kind of local level assemblies. There were an autonomous zones inside Chola. All right. Suppose this is the entire area of Chola, and in this area of Chola you have various such kind of zones. It is Nadus basically. One Nadu, two Nadu, third Nadu, fourth Nadu, fifth Nadu, sixth Nadu, seventh Nadu, eighth Nadu. So all these Nadu were under control of Cholas. Therefore, it is called as Tamil Nadu. All right. Therefore, it is called as Tamil Nadu today. So this Nadu as a term is used for the first time in the Uttaramerur inscription. Fine. Now this Nadu was what? This Nadu was basically the autonomous zones inside Chola, which was managing their local affairs through their own assemblies, local level assemblies. So suppose there is one Nadu which is called as Ur. Another one is called as Sabha. Third one is called as Nagaram. All right. So what was Ur Nadu? Ur Nadu was those Nadu which was controlled by the common form of assembly and controlled by all classes of people together. So there was no any specific class of people ruling over this particular area. That is Ur. All right. So Ur was controlled by the common man together. So common man assembly was called as Ur. All right. So it was a village level assembly controlled by the common man. So they used to elect their own representative, like just like panchayat basically. All right. And this is how they used to control over their area. So one classification of Nadu was Ur. Another one was also Sabha. Fine. So Sabha was basically an assembly of Brahmins. Now here only the Brahmins used to form the assembly in Sabha. Now what kind of assembly? See, there were also villages which were gifted by the king to the prominent Brahmins in South India. That is called as Brahmade grants. Brahmade. There were various kind of grants. Brahmade, Agrahara. So Brahmade grants was the grants given to the Brahmins. The land grants given to the Brahmins were called as Brahmade. And the land grants given to the temples were called as Agrahara. So Agrahara was the land grants given to the temples, and Brahmadev was the land grants given to the Brahmins. So Sabha was the assembly of Brahmins in the Brahmadev villages. Sabha was assembly of Brahmins in the Brahmadev villages. And Nagaram. Nagaram was an assembly of merchants. So merchants also used to enjoy full autonomy to govern their local affair in their area, which was declared as Nagaram. So the local level assemblies in the Chola Nadus, they were of three types: Ur, Sabha, and Nagaram. Fine. And these Ur, Sabha, Nagaram were autonomous zones inside the Cholas. This is how the Nadu system used to function in Cholas. Fine. And what happened, according to Burtonstein, the same Nadu which was the strength of the Cholas also became weakness of Chola once the leadership of Cholas started declining. Then these Nadus became an autonomous zone altogether. They declared their independence from the Cholas, and this is how Cholas started weakening, declining gradually, and finally Cholas area were overtaken by various smaller kingdoms like Yadavas, Pandyas, Hoysalas in Dwara Samudra, which was also a question asked to you in prelims last year. कि द्वार समुद्रा कहाँ है? So Dwara Samudra was the capital of Hoysalas. So Hoysalas also controlled. So you can see here, Yadavas, controlled northern part of the Tamil Nadu area. Then Hoysalas, they also control the central part of Tamil Nadu, and they declared the capital as Dwara Samudra. All right. So Dwara Samudra became the capital of Hoysalas. And similarly, you have the Pandyas, it's already there. So they also control the southern part of Tamil Nadu. Once again, they regained their power once more. So then Kakatiyas of Warangal. So they also control the area of Warangal. Yadavas in Devagiri. So see, these all areas, Devagiri became another very prominent area after the decline of Cholas, and then it was also prominent till the time of the Zain Sultanate. All right. So Devagiri, Yadavas control the area of Devagiri, Hoysalas control Dwar Samudra, Pandyas of Madurai, and Kakatiyas of Warangal. This is how, after the decline of Cholas, these all smaller kingdoms emerged in the medieval period itself. Fine. And then you also have had the Vijayanagara Empire also in the medieval area. That is how you have to take up the medieval period. When you take up the medieval period, you also have to go through the Vijayanagara Empire in that way. So once Vijayanagara Empire came, they all were submerged under their control. Fine. That is how Vijayanagara became another formidable power in South Indian history, but it was in medieval period altogether. Fine. So that is the history of South India altogether. So this question can be asked to you about Nadu. This question can be asked to you about Ur Sabha Nagaram. And most important, from where we get the information about this Ur Sabha Nagaram. Uttara Merur inscription is very important for all of you, of Parantak first. That is a source for all of us to know about Ur Sabha Nagaram. That is local level assemblies of Cholas, which was the strength of Chola Nadu system. So this Nadu system was basically the autonomous regions under the Cholas were called as Nadus. All right. So today Tamil Nadu is basically the same particular area. So it is the entire autonomous regions of Nadus has come under one control system. It's called as Tamil Nadu today. ठीक है, तो नाडु क्यों तमिलनाडु कहा जाता है वो आप समझ गए होंगे अब इसके बाद. ठीक है, तो यहाँ से इसका ओरिजिन हुआ. Fine. So that is all about your history of South India. So ancient India is now done with. पूरा का पूरा. ठीक है. So with this, your this ancient India class is now completed. Then I think today only I have spoken to Kanishk sir. So we'll take your some 10-12 classes on polity that is going to be based upon current affairs issues mainly. All right. So polity from current affairs perspective, we'll discuss entire thing. Fine. So I hope you have gone through polity at least, Lakshmikant. So with this information, whatever Kanishka will tell you, that will be more than sufficient. Lakshmikant and Kanishka class will be sufficient to complete the entire story of polity. Fine. So that is the program right now. And again, after let's say a couple of days, when Ganesh will give the schedule, then also I will share the schedule of some of the classes of modern India with all of you. All right. So freedom struggle, I take the class freedom struggle. तो वो कुछ 7-8 क्लासेस लूंगा फ्रीडम स्ट्रगल के ऊपर, तो उसके साथ पॉलिटी और फ्रीडम स्ट्रगल के साथ ये सारा सेगमेंट आपका कंप्लीट हो जाएगा. ठीक है. सो दैट इज ऑल अबाउट एंशिएंट इंडिया. एंड अभी जो टेस्ट अभी बाकी है आप लोग का, अब कल से मैं टेस्ट पे लग जाऊंगा, तो टेस्ट पेपर जितना बचा हुआ है बना के मैं आपको जल्द से जल्द दे दूंगा. ठीक है ना. नेक्स्ट टेस्ट किस चीज पे था, कुछ याद है आपको? ज्योग्राफी का टेस्ट दे दिया सबने. नेक्स्ट टेस्ट क्या था अभी? अच्छा देख लीजिएगा, जो भी होगा मुझे एक बार मैसेज कर दीजिएगा, तो उसका टेस्ट का पेपर जो है बना के मैं आपको 2-3 दिन के अंदर दे दूंगा उसका. ठीक है. तो थोड़ा सा टेस्ट पे भी काम करना शुरू कर दीजिए. क्लासेस जितना होना था उतना तो हो ही गया है, सफिशिएंट है. ठीक है. जो थोड़ा बहुत बचा हुआ है वो भी हो जाएगा इसी मंथ में. तो उस हिसाब से मुझे लगता है प्रीलिम्स का डेट थोड़ा सा तो रिशेड्यूल होगा ही होगा. ठीक है. तो वहाँ तो आप रखिए ध्यान की डेट फिर से बताया जाएगा यूपीएससी के द्वारा, तो उस हिसाब से टाइम मिलेगा आपको सफिशिएंट. बट यू प्रिपेयर योर एंटायर सिलेबस बाय दिस मंथ ओनली, बाय द एंड ऑफ दिस मंथ ओनली. ठीक है. ठीक है. तो फिर रखते हैं. इफ एनी क्वेश्चन यू हैव यू कैन आस्क, अदरवाइज यू कैन कंक्लूड द क्लास.
सर साइंस एंड टेक का सर वो राजशेखर सर बोल रहे थे कि उन्होंने आपको साइंस एंड टेक का पेपर भेजा हुआ है, आप वही फॉरवर्ड कर दीजिए सर.
मैं एक बार चेक कर लेता हूँ, मैं चेक करके फिर आपको फॉरवर्ड कर दूंगा. ठीक है.
जी सर.
फाइन. सो अदर क्वेश्चन नहीं? ठीक है. फिर तो इतना ही रखते हैं. फाइन. एंड हाँ, यू हैड अ क्वेश्चन ना निशांत, सबऑर्डिनेटेड डेट.
जी सर. सबऑर्डिनेटेड डेट.
देखो सबऑर्डिनेटेड डेट क्या होता है ना, कि वो सेकेंडरी डेट को कहते हैं सबऑर्डिनेटेड डेट. डेट बहुत तरीके के होते हैं. जब आप शुरुआत में आप इक्विटी के रूप में लोन उठाते हो, जिसमें आप शेयर के थ्रू देते हो और किसी से पैसा लेते हो, तो उसको इक्विटी शेयर्स कहते हैं. तो जो इक्विटी शेयर होल्डर होता है उसका राइट ज्यादा होता है कंपनी के बंद होने के बाद. ठीक है. मतलब जब आप कंपनी लिक्विडेट करते हो, बंद करते हो, तो पैसा आपको वापस करना होता है जिससे आपने लोन लिया हुआ है. तो जो इक्विटी शेयर होल्डर होता है उसको पहले आप देते हो पैसा. ठीक है. मतलब जिससे आपने तुरंत लोन लिया हो उसको हम कहते हैं सीनियर डेट. ठीक है. तो सीनियर डेट और जूनियर डेट होता है. सीनियर डेट मतलब वैसा डेट जिसके लायबिलिटी आपके ऊपर पहले बनती है. ठीक है. तो इनिशियल जो आप लोन लेते हो उसकी लायबिलिटी आपकी पहले बनती है उसको पेमेंट करने के लिए, उसको कहते हैं सीनियर डेट. जो कंपनी फंक्शन होने के बाद फिर आप लोन उठाते हो उसकी लायबिलिटी होती है सेकेंडरी डेट. ठीक है. तो उसको कहते हैं सबऑर्डिनेट डेट भी कहते हैं, उसको जूनियर डेट भी कहते हैं.
कंपनी बंद होने के बाद जो लोन लेते हैं उसको सबऑर्डिनेट डेट.
नहीं, जैसे कंपनी आपने फॉर्म किया तो फॉर्म करने के समय आप लोन लेते हो.
हाँ.
वो लोन लिया आपने तो उसको कहते हैं सीनियर डेट.
सीनियर डेट.
हाँ. और
ठीक है.
कंपनी जब फंक्शन करती रहती है फिर भी आप लोन लेते हो, उसको कहते हैं आप जूनियर डेट.
ठीक है.
ठीक है. तो वही सीनियर डेट और सबऑर्डिनेट डेट, ये डिफरेंसेस है दोनों के बीच में. ठीक है. अब सवाल यहाँ ये होता है, क्वेश्चन क्यों उठता है? उठता है तब जब कंपनी बंद होती है. तब जब कंपनी बंद होती है तो किसकी जिम्मेवारी पहले बनती है आपकी? एज ए कंपनी किसको पहले आपको पेमेंट करना होगा? तो कंपनी आप बंद कर रहे हो, जो डेट आपने लिया उसको पूरा चुकता करना होगा. ठीक है. जो लिक्विडेट करते हैं कंपनी को, कि जितना पैसा है आप उस पैसे को आपको जिससे आपने लोन लिया है उसको आपको वापस करना है. तो उसमें प्रायोरिटी फिक्स करना होता है. प्रायोरिटी क्या फिक्स करना होता है? जो सीनियर डेट वाले लोग होंगे उनको पहले आपको देना होगा पेमेंट. ये कंपनी लॉ के अंतर्गत है. ठीक है. तो उनका पेमेंट आप पहले कर लोगे और उसके बाद भी आपके पास कैश बच जाता है या पैसा बच जाता है आपके अकाउंट में, कंपनी के अकाउंट में. तब उस पैसे से आप जो जूनियर डेट या सबऑर्डिनेट डेट है जिससे आपने बाद में लोन लिया था उसको आपको पेमेंट करना होता है. तो प्रायोरिटी जो है जो सबऑर्डिनेट डेट की होती है वो सेकेंडरी होती है, प्राइमरी होती है सीनियर डेट की. इसलिए सबऑर्डिनेट डेट का कॉन्सेप्ट कंपनी लॉ के तहत इसको यूज करते हैं. ठीक है. तो ये सबऑर्डिनेट डेट का कॉन्सेप्ट ये है. ये कॉन्सेप्ट तभी आता है प्रैक्टिस में जब कंपनी लिक्विडेट होती है, बंद होती है, अदरवाइज नहीं आता है. बाकी सारे प्रोविजन फीचर्स एक ही है। आपने डेट लिया है, जिस इंटरेस्ट रेट पे डेट लिया है वो आपको इंटरेस्ट पे करना है, चाहे वो प्राइमरी हो चाहे सेकेंडरी हो। कहानी तब आती है जब कंपनी बंद हो जाती है या बंद होने वाली होती है, अब आपको पेमेंट करना होता है। जिनसे आपने डेट लिया था पहले, तो आप पहले किसको पेमेंट करेंगे? तो वो जो पहला पेमेंट वाला जो इशू है, तब उसमें आता है कंपनी लॉ के अंतर्गत कि जिससे आपने शुरुआत में लिए लोन कंपनी शुरू करने के समय, ठीक है, बिना उसको आप राइट ऑफ ओनरशिप दिए हुए, तो उन लोगों को पहले आप पे करेंगे लोन, ठीक है। तो उस वैसे लोगों को कहते हैं सीनियर डेट, जिसकी प्रायोरिटी पहली है आपकी पेमेंट की। और वो लोन जिसके सीनियर डेट देने के बाद जो बचता है पैसा, उस लोन को चुकता करने वाले जो बात होती है उसको कहते हैं हम सबऑर्डिनेटेड डेट, ठीक है। तो ये कॉन्सेप्ट है कंपनी के लिक्विडेशन के समय के कहानी है ये, उससे पहले इसका यूज नहीं होता है। कंपनी जब बंद होने होती है तभी ये कॉन्सेप्ट यूज आता है, ठीक है। तो ये कहानी है, ठीक है, ठीक है। फिर वी कैन कंक्लूड द क्लास टुडे, और फिर हम लोग जल्दी मिलते हैं, ठीक है। कल आज ही बात हुई है तो एक दो दिन में शेड्यूल दे देंगे, फिर बताता हूँ कैसे सारे क्लासेस होंगी, ठीक है। बाकी अब टेस्ट पे ज्यादा हम लोग फोकस करेंगे, ठीक है ना, ठीक है। थैंक यू देन, सी यू ऑल, बाय बाय, टेक केयर।
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.